All right, all right, all right. Thank you so much to everyone who is joining in. I really, really appreciate it. A few viewers joining in. So I am here with my new best friend here, Dr. Kris Marsh. She is
Hello,
so
Dr.
chipper.
L. Yes, you are my new best friend.
How is everything? How are you?
Everything is fantastic. I am doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I've been thanking you so much for joining in and coming to the show. I'm going to thank you again publicly. Thank you for doing this. You didn't have to do it, but I really, really appreciate that you did.
I did not
Thanks for
have to
doing
do it, but I wanted to do it, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Sincerely.
it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I usually show a bunch of videos, but because for time constraints, we're not going to do that. And I couldn't find anyone that was really appropriate. And there's a lot I want to ask you, so we're just going to jump straight into the conversation. So I do like to greet some people. So hey, hello to my girl Les. Thank you so much for joining in. And if anybody else comes on, I do like to say I would like you to say hello. So to the guest and myself, so we can acknowledge you. So Dr. Marsh, if you
Yes.
would please, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you. I will introduce myself. Again, it's such a pleasure to be with you, Dr. L. Thank you for having me. So I'm Kris Marsh. I am a sociologist and a demographer at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'm actually from Los Angeles, did my PhD at the University of Southern California. I've been at Maryland since '08. I'm a full professor. I am proud to say, also kind of annoyed to say, that I'm the first Black woman who has gone from assistant to associate to full in the sociology department at the University of Maryland, College Park. It's a pleasure and honor to be a full professor, the first Black woman who's gone through all three steps, but still and yet in 2024, it's embarrassing that I have to be the first anything. But I wear it with pride and honor. So all of my research, and I say this wherever I go, and I stand by this. I say this wherever I go, and it's really important to me. All of my research looks at avenues into the Black middle class or consequences of being in the Black middle class. Because one of the things I decided early on in my academic career, and hear me when I say this, I decided early on that I did not want to pimp the poor to make my academic career. There are people that do not look like me who have spent their entire time talking, their entire academic career talking about poor Black Americans. And there is a poor Black, there's poor Black Americans, there's poor Black for any racial ethnic group, whether or not you're Black, white, pinstripe, or purple. But I wanted to look at people that weren't necessarily poor, because if you only look at poor Black Americans, the assumption is you only have like poor Black people out there. I'm like, no, there is a middle class in spite of all of the isms that we have to navigate through. And so because of that, I study avenues into the Black middle class and consequences of being in the Black middle class. If I were to say that differently, there was a statistic running around years ago, not sure if it's valid or not, but they were saying like 2 out of 3 Black men will go to jail, or 1 out of 3 Black men will go to jail. My research looks at the other two, because we can spend all day looking at that one that's going to go to jail, which again, I don't know if the statistic is correct. But I'm looking at the people who have quote unquote done everything right, but they still don't have the same outcomes as other racial and ethnic groups. So that's why I look at avenues into the Black middle class and consequences of being in the Black middle class.
Very good, very good. Let me say hello to some people again. To hello to my girl Les. Hello to Rhonda. She says, "Doctor, good evening, Dr. L, Dr. Kris Marsh in chat."
Thanks,
Tracy
Ron.
from looking in from LinkedIn. She goes way back with me when I was had a show called Captain Hunter's podcast. So hello to you, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining. Lets me know that the link that the LinkedIn is working, is connected. Hello to HJ. Hello to High Vibe. Hello to your Shalom. She High Vibe was yes and you about what you were saying there about
Oh, okay.
the other two and all that kind of stuff. Hello to Deborah Hutchison. Uh, hello to Angela from Philly, and a good hello to you. Now you were talking about that statistics, and I think if memory serves me correctly, I'm fairly certain about this. It was 1 in 3 Black men are in jail. I've talked about this. 1 in 3 Black men are not in jail. that statistic is often taken out of context. What that
Right.
statistic was saying is that people who are born, I think, like after 1994, if the trend continues about that, then those people who are born, those Black men who were born after 1994, I think it is 94, 95, somewhere around there, they will be 1 in 3 of those Black men will be in prison.
Right.
So those statistics uh, are just are just crazy. But we've done a lot of work to stop that trend as it was going. So, but I do
Right.
appreciate.
Right, and I
I,
appreciate you for the clarification. That's why I wanted to go on record. Like, I don't know if the
yeah,
statistic
yeah, yeah,
is accurate, but
yeah.
what we do is that we leave the conversation at the one
Mm.
and
Right,
ignore
right,
the
right.
other two. So my research picks up on the other two.
No, and I'm glad that you do because even with that statistic, let's just say it was true. We know it's not, but let's just say it was true. It would certainly make all black men look dusty, broke, bad. You
Right,
walk into a store, half of these dudes have been in prison. That's just not the case.
right.
So, but I do, and you're right. We not enough attention is paid to the 2, 3, 4, whatever that other statistic is. Y'all make sure you hit the like button so other people can join, and I would appreciate it. So explain to us for the people out there the professorship. I'm an adjunct, so it was adjunct assistant. Explain that progression to how you get to be a full professor.
So yeah, we start with adjuncts, then we go to assistant, associate, and full. So adjuncts typically are going to be the professors that teach larger classes. They teach more class. They probably teach like 3 or 4 classes, and they're not necessarily on a trajectory to be like a full-time faculty member in the department. They're more so thought as kind of like temporary staff. And then you have assistant professors. And so assistant professors, like after you've gotten your PhD, a lot of people will start out on the tenure track. Here's what a lot of people don't know about like academia. It's like, so when you're an assistant professor, after about 5 or 6 years, you have to go up for tenure. Every assistant professor that's trying to go to the next level has to go up for tenure. If you do not get tenure, you are required to vacate the department within 365 days. Or I don't know how long it is, but you cannot stay in the same department if you do not get tenure. So the way the process goes, if I were to liken it to like rap music, let's just say I have like a rap song or a rap CD. I have to like give it to like 6 other rappers, and all 6 rappers have to say like her tracks are really good. We should make her a part of the group or part of the crew. And so in academia, they tether all of my research together. They send it out to 6 scholars in the field, and all 6 scholars in the field have to say that my work is spectacular, and then they give me tenure. I don't know what the numbers are, and we can look them up on Google, but the number of Black faculty that actually go from assistant professor to an associate professor with tenure is minimal. It might be less than 10%. I'm not actually sure. A lot of Black faculty get stuck at the associate level and they don't actually go up for full professor. So from assistant to associate, it's about 6 years. And then from associate to full professor is about another 6 years or so. It took me 10 years. Once I wrote my book, The Love Jones Cohort, which I hope that we're going to be able to talk about a lot today, I then went up for promotion to a full professor. And I think my promotion was granted April of last year, I think is when I found out. Actually can't remember when I found out. I think it was April or May I found out that I was a full professor. So yeah, we have had other Black women who have been full professors, but they came in as full professors. I'm the only Black woman who has come in as an assistant, then went to associate, and am now a full professor.
Very good. Thank you for the clarification. Now, I do want to get to the book. I really do, but you got me stuck on
Yes.
this. Why is it that so many of our people get stuck in this assistant professor, associate professor phase? Why is that?
I don't know all of the reasons, but I think some of the reasons is that we get bogged down doing a lot of work that's not um we don't get credit for, and we're not awarded for it. So I, as a Black woman, as a Black female academic, or Black academician, as some may call it, I make I take really good care of my graduate students, especially my Black graduate students. So there's a lot of labor that I do that I can't check off on a box for what that I've done all week. But if I have to go to somebody's house, have to drop them a couple of dollars, have to talk them off the ledge about this or that, the other, that doesn't make it into my progress report every year. Now it should, and there's been conversation about what kind of labor do we value. Typically it's all about how many publications you get. If I don't have the time to do the publications because I'm busy doing too much emotional work with my students that feel like they're not welcomed in these spaces, because here's another thing that I say all the time, and I'm going to say it as long as they're going to allow me to say it, because I've on a side note, I've done some implicit bias training with police officers, and here is something that I say in every space that I am in. Police officers kill Black bodies, professors kill Black spirits. What we're going to do is we're going to indict all of these social institutions. We are not going to leave this conversation just with police officers. And I'm not saying all police officers. I'm saying some police officers kill Black bodies, some professors kill Black spirits. And what I mean by that is that I see graduate students that come in excited and eager to, get their PhDs, and a year later they are a shell of themselves. And I'm not indicting the University of Maryland College Park sociology department. I'm indicting professors generally and broadly, because what happens is that they tell students how they should talk, how they should write, what kind of research questions are valuable, who they should compare their groups to. It's always a comparison to white Americans. And so because these students are told like what they can do, what they can't do, what's important, what's valuable, what's going to be research that people are going to want to read, they're just a shell of themselves the first year. So I said, you know what, it's really important that I continue to do the work and help these students understand they deserve to be here and their research is valuable. That's never going to be on a progress report. So what happens is that we get stuck in the middle doing bogged down with the emotional work, so we don't advance our career to the full professor because we don't have the time to do the publications.
All right, listen,
And
I'm
I
going to leave
promise
this.
all the rest of my answers, and I promise, all the rest of my answers will not be this long.
Oh, listen, you take as much time as you need. I definitely want to explore that, but I can't. I definitely want to have you back on to talk about that perspective, because I think that that's important. I was just talking to someone else about that last night. But anyway, let's get into the book here. So I'm definitely gonna have
Yes.
you back. We'll definitely talk about that. And I want to say hello to some more people here. Miles is saying hello. Good to have some brothers in here, some men in here. Hello to you, Nicole. Hello to Tamika. Another male. Ray Alexander. Hello, Dr. L, Dr. Marsh in chat. Please, y'all listen to High Vibe. She says hit the like button. And then Tracy says that what you just said was powerful. Your Jerusalem says that's deep. Gail says that's deep as well. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And Gail says hello. All
Hello,
right.
Gail.
So all right. So your book, and here's the book. I've been pimping
Well,
it
let's
all.
look. Oh, wait. I think I might have a copy just right here. Here we go.
Oh, geez. Oh, it's a good thing you have a copy of. All right. So you wrote the book to address the 2 or 3 or whatever number it is, or who are middle class and doing well for themselves. Tell us about the book and what made you decide to write it?
So it's funny because I am a woman of faith, and I was talking to my pastor years ago, and he's like, you do realize that this is kind of like your ministry, because one of the main reasons why I wrote the book, I was trying to destigmatize singlehood. People will get into and or stay in relationships that are abusive, toxic, unfulfilling, and unrewarding simply because they don't want to hold the title of single. So I want people to be, I want to destigmatize singlehood. I want people to stand confidently in their singleness. If they wanted to get into a relationship, I'm all for that. I want to go on record saying that I am pro-marriage, because I get hate mail on a regular basis saying that I'm bad for Black America because I'm promoting singlehood. I was like, that's, you clearly have not read my book. I'm just trying to destigmatize singlehood. The other thing that I'm really trying to do, and this is not a book just about Black women, but there's a lot of conversation like, why are single Black women getting married? Why are there so many professional Black women that aren't married? Mm-mm. If we have that question is almost coming from a very deficit model, suggesting that Black women don't have something. Doesn't matter what their pedigree is, doesn't matter how many degrees they have, doesn't matter how happy they are, as long as they don't have an MRS degree. That's all that matters. And so I wanted to flip the conversation and say, I don't want to know like why Black women are or are not getting married. What I do want to know is how singles are navigating their lives. So that's what I'm really trying to do in the book. And that's what the book is really trying to get at.
Okay, very good. So I can imagine that you were definitely getting a lot of hate mail in this day and time.
Mhm.
Um, do you pay attention to social media, what's going on, the gender war between men and women and all that?
No, I don't. One of the things I'm kind of really consistent about is like if I get a request, I try to make all podcasts and stuff like that. I think I was on one podcast with someone and there was something about a pink pill or something like that. And I don't really know. I was like, I did the podcast. Did not look back on the podcast. I don't know. I have been told that there's some people that can and are dragging me in the manosphere, which I don't even know what that is, because they make this assumption that I'm talking about like singlehood and talking about we don't need a black man. And I get hate mail constantly, like saying, what you're bad for the black family. And I was like, you don't even understand the arguments that I'm making. If you take the time to read the book that I took 7 years to write, then we can have a conversation. But what you're not ready to do is look at the title of my book and automatically assume that I'm bashing men or I'm bashing the a black family and not have read the book. So that's when I get a little bit frustrated because people will have these conversations and they didn't even take the time to engage with the book.
Very good. Well, I actually read the book, and I hope that my viewers did too. So,
Right. But wait, here's the other thing. People like, I pray to God, you're not going to be like, on page 75, you said this. Because here's one thing that I've noticed. Once you write a book as an author, you don't go back and read the book. So whatever I said on page 75 is what I said. I said what I said, and I stand by that. But I don't go back and read my book. My book came out a couple of years ago. So I don't know what everything is in the book. I don't know that I remember everything that's actually in it.
listen, I definitely understand that. I wrote a book too, and I don't remember I don't know what's in there. And
I
people have,
stand by it, though.
and people have said, I've do this podcast and stuff. They're catching up on stuff. Video 100, number 100. I don't know what I said in that. What did I say?
What,
So
right. I pray before each podcast. Whatever I said was what I was supposed to say in that podcast or say in that book, and I move on.
all right. So you get the hate mail from people who say that they, about the title and all that. So, and you're saying that that you're not against black marriage. So your goal is to say singlehood is okay. You be satisfied in where you are? Is that the ultimate purpose?
Right. So in the preface of the book, I say explicitly, I'm all for Black marriage and I'm all for Black love. But I'm not just going to give a blanket support of just Black marriage or Black love. It's got to be healthy marriages. It's got to be good. They have to be good marriages. They have to be fulfilling marriages. So I'm like, here's what I think is kind of important. The title of single is a title that we have all held at one point in time. Think about that. Some of us may be married now, some of us may be divorced, some of us may be widows, but we've all held the title of single at one point in time. And I'm simply saying it's really important for us to stand confidently in our singleness, and then everything else can be added unto us. People say all the time, like, well, I want to be in a romantic relationship, because we'll come back to that. I want to be in a romantic relationship. I don't want to be alone. And I was like, if you can't be with yourself, finish the rest of the statement. Why do you think somebody else is going to want to be with you? I think I'm witty. I think I'm relatively engaging. I actually think that I'm funny, and I enjoy time with myself. But I think it's important for us to enjoy time with ourselves before I can enjoy time with someone else. And so I'm not sitting here saying that no, you shouldn't get married, any of that. But I'm just saying stand confidently in your singleness. And once you're standing confidently in your singleness, I think you can make different decisions. And you make decisions out of your wholeness, whatever those decisions would be, whether that's to be in a romantic relationship, whether or not that's to buy a house somewhere, whether or not that's to go on a trip somewhere. Just stand confidently in your singleness. And I think everything else will be added unto you. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it.
Okay, so let's get into it. So why do you think that so many women, black women in particular, are single, successful, but yet single? And no, but when I
Right.
say single, I mean, when I'm saying single, I'm saying no boyfriends, there and no spouse. That's why I'm making the distinction. So if somebody reads the title, like, oh, you kind of, single and no spouse means the same thing. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying a lot of these ladies can't even find a boyfriend. But why do you think that is?
Right. I'm going to answer that in two different ways. Here's what's really funny about the book. I really try to not even have the conversation about why are people single. In Cambridge, my publisher came back to me and like, yo, you have single in the title of your book. You're gonna have to engage in that conversation in some kind of way. I don't want to say that I try to give some pushback. They're like, you have to engage in the conversation. There can be a plethora of reasons as to why that is. If we look at it from a sociological perspective, some of the conversations that are out there are about this idea of like educational homogamy. So and I'm not saying that this is Kris Marsh's argument. What I am saying is that this is what the social science literature says. For example, one, they say there's a sex ratio imbalance, and two, they talk about educational homogamy. I'm going to talk about those kind of in general together. So, for example, It's not a value judgment, but let's just say I, Kris Marsh, want to marry another Black male PhD who owns his own, who has a PhD, owns his own home, makes $250,000, has an estate planning. He's simply not there. Especially we're talking about Black men and women at an advanced degree level. So the question is, what do I do? Do I want to marry outside of do I want to marry somebody from another racial and ethnic group? Do I want to marry somebody that doesn't meet those same criteria? But here's what we do know from the social science literature. People, and we think about this idea of educational homogamy. People typically marry people who look like them and are in their same spaces. And so when I say look like them, I'm talking about like their social status and their pedigree and are in the same kind of like social spaces. So typically, if I have a PhD, I'm typically going to marry somebody else who has a PhD or another advanced degree. If they're not in the room, we have to decide whether or not what we're going to do with that. So it's just the fact that it could be educational homogamy. It could be that there's more Black women that are like professional Black women than there are professional Black men. It can be a plethora of reasons. That's my first answer. My second answer, which I want to quickly dovetail into, is that why are we always, and I say this at the end of the book, after reading the book, I hope you're just as likely to ask somebody, why are they married, as we are to ask somebody, why are you single? We always ask single folks, why are you single? But we don't ask married folks, why you're married. And I think if we keep asking the question, what we do is we privilege marriage. And again, singlehood becomes it becomes the deficit model. It becomes like something that no one wants to ascribe to and wants to be a part of. And so I would want us to push past just that conversation. And if we're going to ask people why they're single, we should also be asking married people why they're married and wait for a coherent answer, as opposed to someone just saying, oh, I love my boo. Like, no, I'm going to need for you to give some coherency. Because one of the things the respondents talked about, and I'm not sure if it made it in the book, I talked about like for the holidays, they have to come up with their narratives, explain like why they're single. And if people are going to be preparing their narratives, I think everybody should be preparing their narratives. I don't think it should only be single folks that are having to prepare their narratives. Everybody should have to explain their status, not just single folks. So to answer your question, there's a plethora of reasons. I can't give one reason in particular as to why there are a lot of single Black women. There's many reasons why that could be the case.
Okay.
What you try to back me in the corner, force me to say why it is? I don't.
Okay, so you started off with saying that there's not enough. If I'm misinterpreting your answer, let me know.
Mhm.
There's not enough. Are there enough Black men to go around? Right, a woman in your situation would want to marry someone who's got the same things going on. I get that. Are there enough of those men to go around?
If you're looking at just like educational level, women slightly outnumber men when you get to advanced degrees.
Hmm. So should the women then go to men who are not as advanced degrees? So you got a PhD, a truck driver can make well over $100,000 a year.
That's not my place to answer. But more, where it is my place to say something is that how about we stop policing Black women and let them do what they want to do? If they want to marry the truck driver, judge them not. If they want to hold out for that possible Black male PhD, judge them not. Why do we keep policing Black women and telling them what they should do in their romantic spaces? I'm not telling them that. I'm just simply telling them what some of the data suggests.
Hmm. I got you. I got you. So I know that you haven't been paying attention to the pink pill and manosphere spaces and all that. So this is where the rubber meets the road out here. This is the grit and grime. This is where things are going on at. So I think that the argument from the manosphere is that the lack of solidified family structures is causing the different sociological problems that we see within the Black community. So if we would partner up and marry, then maybe we could stop some of the things that we both see is in the social sciences, the dropout rates, the incarceration rates, the mental health, all these different rates. That would be an argument. How would you answer that?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't see, here's what I think is beautiful about Black family is that we have this kind of like extended family network.
Mm,
And if anything, one of the arguments that I make in the book is that we should expand the definition of family.
Mhm. Mhm.
It shouldn't just have to be a mother, father, a black picket fence, and 2.5 children.
Mhm.
If it takes a village to raise a child, then like, why can't we all be considered a family? Like, why can't me and my neighbor and one of my girlfriends, why can't we be considered a family? I am arguing we need to be more inclusive of the term. And we need to expand the term and not think of it in very narrow, um, heteronormative mother father kind of ways. If you're talking about needing two people in the household to raise a child, why do those two people, why do they have to be a husband and a wife? Why can it be two adults that are helping raise a child?
Okay.
And let me tell you
Uh,
why. The reason why I say that is because one of the arguments is that when we think about like outcomes for children, some data suggests that ch- children tend to do better in a two-parent household. But that's not saying that it's a two-parent household where it's like a loving father, a loving mother, and so on and so forth. If me and my dearest girlfriend, who I have, she has a child who is my goddaughter. Her husband recently passed. I'm single. If we develop a family together and we work together to raise that child, how do we know that child's not going to have positive outcomes as somebody who's in a mother, father, and a traditional kind of family household? So I would argue we need to redefine the family, and it doesn't have to be husband, father, husband, wife, and 2.5 children, or two wives and two husbands. It could be just people that are in non-romantic nurturing relationships to help raise the child. If we think that that household is the structure that is going to solve all of the sociological ills in the world.
well, I guess we don't have the data, and you would know better. I don't know. We don't have the data as far as what those families would look like 20, 30 years. I know this is kind of a new experiment. I do agree with you about the extended family aspect. I think that's very important. And certainly I think that actually I was just reading this the other day, that if something happens to a father, that doesn't mean that the family inherently implodes.
Right.
People step in and help to raise child or children. So that I can see a little bit of the argument there.
Yeah.
Have you done any comparison? I don't know this. I know I gave you some questions. I'm not trying to do a hit job or anything. So
Oh, no,
have you
no, no.
have you looked at the comparison with other families? Other ethnicities, I should say. When you look at the marriage rates of East Indians and Asians, they're up to 80, 90, 80%. And when you look at those marital families, the economic outcomes of the household and all that, is there something to be said about marriage in particular? If these other ethnicities are doing this and succeeding, why isn't that Black culture is not emulating those trends?
Well, I wonder what succeeding actually means in that context. But I don't look at other racial and ethnic groups. There's enough variation in Black America that I can always compare within Black America. That's very important to me. One of the things I say in the preface of the book is that this is a politics of citation book. And what I mean by that is that I'm citing Black people talking about Black families. There are a lot of scholars who are not Black, who have made their entire careers looking at Black Americans. And I was like, no. There are Black scholars that are making these exact same arguments, but they're not thought of as the experts because they're not white. And I'm just using Black and white for illustration purposes. So for me, it was really important to do a politics of citation. In that same vein, when we start doing these comparisons, if we're not careful, it looks as if the group that we're comparing to becomes the gold standard, or that becomes the group that we need to aspire to. There's enough richness in Black America that I can compare with I can do intra-racial comparisons where I don't want to do interracial comparisons. And that gets back to what I was saying at the beginning of this podcast, that professors kill Black spirits because a lot of times professors are like, how does this relate to the larger population, i.e., to white America? And
Mm.
I don't want to compare Black America to white America because we are Black in America. And there's a whole racial component that we can't ignore. We can't get past. And that is context that helps us understand Black families. So I want to be very careful because I don't want to be flippant and say, I don't care what other racial ethnic groups are doing. But as for me and my house, we're going to study interracial comparisons within Black America. I have no desire to compare across.
Gotcha. No, I definitely think that that's valid. Another argument that is made is that Black Americans were the most married prior to the 1960s. What changed post 1960s? And I was actually thinking about doing a show on this coming Wednesday. So tell us, in your opinion, Um, what changed from being one of the most married to the least married to the least married today?
I don't know. I'm not a historian. I have no idea. I have talked to a woman who wrote a great book called Black Love, Black Family. I can't think of Black Love, Black Marriage, Black Love. Diane Stewart wrote a great book. She's
Oh
more
yeah.
of a she takes a more historical perspective. She might be able to give you an answer to that.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, she came on the show. Didn't I hook you
Yeah.
up?
Yeah, you're the one that connected with her. I was like, hello, why are you asking me this question? I don't profess to be a historian. And again, the work that I'm really focusing on is like the single part of it, not necessarily the marriage part of it. So I don't know what that might be. There's probably some people would probably argue that there were like some political policies in place that de-incentivized marriage, de-incentivized, however you say, didn't value. The policies made it easier for you not to be married, is what I would probably say, but I just don't do that work. So I don't want to give an answer that that's not well informed.
No, no, no. That was actually, I mean, for winging off the top of your head, that was definitely essentially
Yeah.
what Diane
Oh,
Stewart
yeah,
said.
they're gonna argue it's policy based.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's and yeah. So there, a lot are going to say it's policy based.
Yeah,
So
to
yeah,
de-emphasize marriage. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that just kind of brings up all other questions. Why are we still allowing this and all this? And is it, if there's a de-incentivization? Jeez,
That
now you
word.
got me. Now you got me doing it. If there's a de-incentivization about getting married, why are we still allowing this? And by we, I'm saying our community leaders, churches. Why are we not? Why is that not being pushed? And I guess to your argument, it would be, why are we pushing it?
Right.
So if we were doing something at one point in time and we acknowledge that there is a destabilization of the Black family in civil rights, and we don't want strong families and all these other things to get us to the place that we are today, why are we continuing to let it work? As it would be a question to ask, and try to get to the bottom of, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let's see. um let's see. Okay. Let me see here. Let me get to some questions here. I think in the comment section here. Uh,
Okay. I can't
somebody
see the
said,
comment section, so I
I'll
will
read it
trust
to
you.
you.
Okay.
So October says she's going to the movies by herself. She's enjoying what she's doing with her life, and all that. Um, so
Right.
you do push in your book the idea of singlehoods and sisterhood and things like that. Explain a little bit more about that, what you mean by that, and how that would look, and are you still being single and yet looking to date, or how does that look?
Right. So it's funny because in the book, I just did a book talk a couple of days ago, and they were like saying like, who's what do you mean by single? And I usually clarify that, but I didn't. So in this book, I'm talking about people that are single, have never been married, haven't been exposed to the stimuli. In this case, the stimuli is actually marriage. I do think there's probably some really great conversations and research that can talk about people that are returning back to singlehood, whether for widowed, separation, or divorce. But I want people who have never been exposed to the stimuli. And I want to know how they're living their lives. I don't want to keep having the conversation, why aren't you married? I'm like, because that's a deficit. I'm like, how are you? Let's celebrate you. What are you doing? Whether or not you're married, whether or not you're single by choice or by force is something that we do grapple with in the book. But what are you doing as a single person? And one of the things that consistently comes up over and over again with the respondents, and I interview both male and females. I interview males and females for the book. Um, for the Black women in particular, they had a sister circle, or they had their sorority sisters, or they had non-romantic nurturing relationships that were fulfilling to them and helped them navigate their singleness. I didn't see the Black men to the same degree have these level of like sister circles and sorority sisters and these type of girlfriends that the Black women have. And again, the Black women said these girlfriends and their friends really helped them through any kind of like crunchy times they might have as single. And I hope we can talk a little bit about that. But for the Black men, we didn't see it to the same degree. So one of the things that I hope comes out of this book is that we normalize non-romantic nurturing relationship among Black men. And because a lot of Black men, the respondents that I talked to talked about how, they were afraid to like, be really intimate with their male friends because people are going to think that they're gay or they're soft or they're this. And so I was like, okay, I do hope that women got that thing on lock in the book. And I hope after reading the book, we really can normalize these romantic, nurturing, these non-romantic, nurturing, intimate relationships again among other men and not make some stereotypical assumptions about them.
Do the Black men that you married, I'm assuming that they're in this cohort, we didn't define that. So if you could, number one, define what you mean by this cohort, right? This socioeconomic place that where people are at. And did the men in particular do they want to get married? Do they want to get married?
Um, yeah, I don't remember the numbers, but yes, some of the people, both men and women in the cohort wanted to get married. Yes.
Okay. Could you
But I
define
remember, hmm?
go ahead. Go ahead.
But I remember the women in particular, they were kind of like, yeah, I want to get married, but they weren't willing to settle.
Right. They don't want the truck driver who makes $100,000. Right.
No, I don't know that it was like it's not the truck driver that makes 100,000. I don't know. But when we say settle, I think we can't make it just about money, right?
Mm.
So it's like I don't want to settle for someone who's not emotionally available. I don't want to settle for someone who doesn't know how to articulate their feelings. I don't want to settle for someone who doesn't know how to understand when I just need a moment. Is not like self-aware. It's not necessarily settling only on the economics factor. I think
So
that part is kind of
talk about this emotional availability. That seems to be the biggest thing that I think that ladies are saying nowadays is that they want this before they got married. We talk about post or yeah, pre 1960s. We were married. Now they want this emotionally available man. He's got to be able to cry and be sensitive. And what does all that mean? And do you really want that in a man? So
Okay, so again, I do not study like relationships. What I was trying to get the only point I was trying to drive is that when we say settle, it can't only be a monetary factor. Because if it is, what's unfortunately what's going to be said is that like well, women are just money grubbing leeches and they just with men for their money. No, when we talk about settling doesn't only mean money. That's the only argument I was trying to make. I don't know about these emotional available men or stuff like that because I just don't do dating stuff. I just kind of like don't. But it's funny because funny people always say like people do you offer dating advice? I was like I do not. I do not. I do not. I was like, but the only thing I will say is like, write a book about if you are single and you want to be married, write a book about singles. And I guarantee you they're going to slide into your DMs and like, you ain't got to be single long, baby. I was like, did you read any of my book? Did you read any of my books? So the only advice I can tell women, women in particular, if you want to be married, write yourself a book about singlehood because they will show up in your emails, your DMs. And or go to the airport. I run into people in the airport all the time.
fair enough. Fair enough. This is a question I kind of went to before. It says in post-welfare arena era, not taught the value of women, not taught the value of marriage. Do you think that that's been true? That since the post 1960s, the welfare era, the policies that we talked about were the de-incentivization. Man, we're gonna make that a word of the day here. The
I think it's
de-incentivizing,
incentivized. Yeah.
yeah, of marriage. Do you think that that was a thing where in particular in the Black community where there's this thing is just not pushed? It's just go to college, become the best version of yourself, travel, get yourself some girlfriends, and then it's just not pushed. Do you think that that is a thing?
I think it
You
could be part of the
okay.
conversation.
Okay, I'll try not to
I
stop
just
out.
that's just kind of not the work that I do. So I just don't. That's not my area really.
Hmm. Okay. Let's see here.
But let's unpack that for a second. If we're saying like it's not, if we're saying that marriage is, what's the issue if we say that marriage is not pushed and we say go to college, get yourself a degree, find yourself some friends? What's the issue with that?
From the male perspective, is that or the
I
female
don't.
perspective?
Well, that's the question. So, Michael, what's the issue? What's the problem with that?
I think that the problem. I think that the issue is that the ladies who, in particular, the ladies who go through that type of progression in life, are not prepared to be wives. That they don't know. And I've gone on dates with women who don't know how to cook, and things along those lines. They don't know how to cook, clean. The traditional model of marriage, of the man being the breadwinner and the woman being the more domestically viable person, that the men who then are where you would want them, not you, Dr. Marsh, but where the women would want them, that type of man wants a particular type of woman. And the women that would be in his quote unquote cohort, or women that would be that he would be interested in, are not those type of women. I don't know if you know about Ebony K. Williams. Ebony K. Williams she was on Fox News for a certain amount of time. She's an attorney. Now she's 42, early 40s, 41, 42, 43, somewhere around there, and has now gone through in vitro. And she has said to have a baby because she is single. And now she has said to the women, if she could go back in time and if she could talk to young women and say, if you're going to do anything, if you really want to be married, if you're a young girl, 18, 19 years old, you want to be married, the time to do it is when you are surrounded with the most viable men in your cohort. She didn't use the word cohort, but she said, what you're getting is essentially what she said is, when you're getting your JD, your MBA, your PhD, also get your MRS degree. So, and I think that is the issue of not being taught the value of marriage, or go after it, or get the man when you're in that circle. I know you don't like to compare the ethnicities and all that, but there's a thing that the white culture would call it ring by spring. By the time that you about to graduate, now you have your engagement ring. Have you heard any of this type of
I know something about Ebony K. Williams and a bus driver. I don't know much about the spring ring thing.
Okay,
I
okay,
don't.
okay, okay, okay.
The conversation, that's all very interesting.
Okay. All right. All right. Listen, I'm in these YouTube streets because people are saying, all this stuff. But that would be essentially the argument, is that they don't understand the value of marriage, what it can bring, what it can do, and therefore because they're putting it off, then they're not viable mates for the type of man that they say that they want.
Mhm.
So something interesting. I don't know.
Right.
Let's see. Uh, Trying to find some more
But I wonder if
questions
you
here.
can get to some of the outcomes of a valuable marriage, not necessarily in a marriage.
Well, that's another thing too. We talked about these different policies and all that. So what is the value of marriage? What are the divorce rates? What are the happiness rates? The quality of marriage, I think, which I think is absolutely valid when you bring that up. I think it's absolutely valid that ladies have said, listen, we're doing better today. We're doing better financially. I don't need to go through. I don't need you in order to live, survive, and etc. As a man, right? I don't need you as a man to live, survive, and all that. So unless you're bringing me the things that I really want, I'm not going to settle for that. So I think
Yeah.
that there's some value to that. I think
If
there's
we
some
look at
value.
some of the research and the scholarship on the Black middle class, you needed a husband and a wife, or in this case, husband and a wife, to be middle class status. But now, as a single person, you can reach middle class status and some of these middle class markers. So the question does become like, what does marriage bring to you, especially if you're thinking about it from an economic perspective? One of the questions that I think is really important, it's an easy question, but it's got really deep implications, and it forces people to be critical about their wants and desires. And to get to the question, I'm gonna give you a quick little story. So I have a friend of mine, well, this person that I know. Okay. I have this guy that I know, and he always says, like, I like light skinned women. I like light skinned women. I like light skinned women. And so one day he said it, and I just said, no, you don't. And I gave a really long, pregnant pause. And I said, I would really value you if you could say, like, I've been conditioned from a very young age to think white is right. And that is why I just like light skinned women. It's not necessarily your preference structure. Same kind of concept. Why do people want to be married? It's an easy question, but I think it's got really deep implications. I think from a very young age, we're told that we're supposed to have this white wedding and this white dress and so on and so forth. Why do people want to get married? It's an easy question, but I think it's important for us to answer that, be able to think about that question.
Mm. So why do you think that people want to get married? I mean, in today's time, 2025, why do you think that people want to get married?
I think they've been conditioned from a young age to think that that's like the status that they have to have. It's like it's another. status that they have to have.
What does it look like in America if we suddenly stop getting married? The vast majority of us stop getting married. What does that look like?
So singlehood is on the rise. There's the growing number of people that may not get married. I think what's important is that we need to, and I said this earlier, we need to redefine what family is. And if it's not two husbands, two wives, husband and a wife, whatever it may possibly be, are there ways in which we can form families in other configurations?
Mm.
There's a whole bunch of, I don't have my glasses on. There's a whole bunch of words coming down at the bottom of the screen.
This says most people don't even understand emotional intelligence. It's a buzzword that people often use without understanding how to master the concept. But this is not Dr. Marsh's area of expertise, and I don't want to press her about that, about emotional intelligence and all that kind of stuff. I'm putting the things up so people can read the comments and all that.
Okay.
I am looking for some questions here for you.
Okay, and while you're looking for questions, one of the things you asked me, which I didn't get a chance to answer, and I apologize. You asked about the title of the book and how do we come up with cohort in the title. So the name of the book is called The Love Jones Cohort. And so one of the things that they talk, okay. So one of the things that the reason why I wrote the book and the reason why I called it this is because when we think about like the quintessential Black married couple on TV, the Black middle class married couple family on TV, or upper middle class family on TV, we often think about the Huxtables on the Cosby Show. But if you look at the movie Love Jones, this is where you start to see a demographic shift moving away from marriage to young Black professionals who aren't married couples, moving from married couples to young Black professionals who aren't married and don't have any children. So I drew from like pop culture, but then I also am a demographer. And as a trained demographer, cohort means nothing more than a band of people. And one of the reasons why I wanted to put cohort in the title is because not everybody has access to advanced education or higher education. And because not everybody has access, I wanted to teach people a word that they may not necessarily know. So I decided to call the group the Love Jones Cohort, which means nothing more than a band of people.
Very good. Okay, I thank you. So, and that's also, you also talked about the social economic. I know we don't want to make it about money, but you also talk about the socioeconomic status of these people. What is the minimum to be in this middle class cohort that you were talking about?
Oh, that's a great question. And I spent a whole chapter talking about like how we define middle class.
Yes, you did.
I spent a whole chapter. Well, again, I didn't want to put that in there. Maybe the publisher told me I had to put that in there. I actually literally wanted to start the book in chapter 2. So the
Okay.
introduction and chapter 1, I did not want to write, but they made me write that. They made me write that. But so if we look at some of the social science literature and like we think about the 4 indicators that are typically used to define middle class status, it's education, income, occupation, and wealth. Those are typically the measures that are used. And so for this book, not for the other work that I've done, for this book, I just recruited people who considered themselves to be middle class. And so they had to define what middle class, they had to define what middle class means
I'm sorry.
for
I'm
them.
sorry. Go ahead. I won't put any
Right,
more
so
on
I'm
you.
trying to push. I can't do 2 things at once. I'm like, I'm trying to read. I'm like, I don't know. They had to define what Black middle class actually means to them, and so some of them did. Some of them didn't own assets. Some of them didn't have a house. And I'm not saying. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying that you have to own a home to be middle class, but some of the literature talks about the fragility of the Black middle class and how the Black middle class is 1 or 2 paychecks away from poverty. And for example, when the world stops on its axis because of a global pandemic like COVID, are Black families able to bounce back? And so it's important to have some kind of like assets. It's not a value judgment. I'm just saying that's what the literature suggests. So it can help out like when the global pandemic or other things happen. So those 4 measures are typically the measures that are used in some of the quantitative work that I've done, statistical models that I built. But with this and the narratives of people that I talked to, they actually had to define middle class, and it was a very broad range. So to answer your question, I can't give you a specific answer as to what the median income has to be considered middle class.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So I want to
Yes.
get to this question. I didn't mean to confuse you with all that. So
Okay,
Ray
right.
Alexander says if Black college women are expected to ring or are to expect a ring by spring, wouldn't there need to be a substantially more Black men in college? At HBCUs, Black men make up on 26% of those on campuses, and we all know for white institutions it's much lower. Um, so the reason that I try to do the work that I'm doing, as far as this podcast and things that I'm studying, is because as a former police officer, right? So unfortunately, I'm running into these people in the criminal justice system. I'm like, why are these people in this place, and why are we here, and what's up with us, and all this kind of stuff. So that's why I went back to school, studied forensic psychology and all this other stuff. So that question that he's asking is really an important one, right? Essentially, how do we get more black men into college so they can become more viable in the cohorts, or those that you interviewed, in their eyes, so they would be more because they don't want to date down, right? They want this emotionally mature man. You got a master's degree, my man's got to have a master's degree or better, right? All this type of stuff that we're seeing, that you probably run into in your literature. We're seeing it all over the interweb, right? All these different social media platforms. What is your thought process about how? And that's why I asked you before about, are there not enough men to go around? We know that as far as a numerical type of thing, but even viable men, whatever they would call viable, how do we get more men? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I don't think that there's like one pronged approach. I think there needs to be multiple approaches. I think Black Americans need reparations that could help. I think we need to look at like the primary grades. We need to have Black men that look like Black teachers that look like the students. They don't see a Black male till they possibly get to college or something like that. We need to have curriculums that are more culturally sensitive and really relate and like engage with Black students. But it seems like we might be going in the reverse direction. But those are some of the things I think that we can help to see Black men at this college level. But it's interesting because like if I'm reading the data right, and I remember the data correctly, there's actually a smaller disparity between Black girls and boys. We'll use those terms at the undergraduate level. When you start getting to the advanced degree, that's where there's a huge disparity between the two.
Yeah, recall reading that same data. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
much, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But of course, I always want to see more Black men and Black people in college if that's what they want to do. Interesting question. I saw something about sexual interactions. Um, I wrote, I wrote a book, right? And I actually interviewed 75 people, but I had to settle on 62. I had to exclude some people because 15 minutes or 45 minutes into the interview, they would say, well, I was married, but my spouse is dead to me. So I don't, I'm like, wait a minute. Like, no, but you were married. So you were exposed to the stimuli. So I had to cut some people out. But of the 62 people that I interviewed, sex did not come up. It came up in a tangential way in like two of the interviews. And so I talked to some of my colleagues that do singlehood work. And I was like, do you think I should say something? If I don't say anything, they're going to say like, this is a big omission that Dr. Marsh didn't put into the book, or it's a big gap that she didn't fill. If I do say something, I think that people might associate sex with singlehood. Out of the 62 people that I interviewed, it came up in a very tangential conversation. So I think I put it in a footnote. So then I went to do a book talk. It was a private event at this house. It's a really wealthy family, Black family out here in Prince George's County, Maryland. And somebody asked a question about sex. And I said, it just didn't come up. And they said, well, maybe you didn't ask the right questions. So I said, okay, maybe I didn't ask the right questions, but also maybe this person I was talking to, I was like, maybe you're automatically associating being single with being promiscuous. And I don't think the two go hand in hand. Because again, I interviewed 62 people and it did not come up. And I think the interview covered enough terrain that if it was a big deal or it was a big issue, they would have talked about it more. So I don't know I can't talk about the sexual activity. I can't talk about the sexual interactions or anything like that because the singles just didn't really talk about that. But I do think some people might be concerned about it, but just did not come up in the conversation. And the only thing I would ask people to do is like, just don't automatically assume because you're single that you're out here being very promiscuous. Because there could be married folks that are out here being promiscuous and not with their partners. And so we don't want to like have these like stereotypical notions about singles. And I'm not saying that question was saying that because I didn't get a chance to read all the questions. I just saw sexual and I was like, ooh, this is a good point for me to interject that part of the conversation. But I think sometimes we're not careful. Like they think singles getting it in every day of the week and twice on Sundays. And it just did not come up in the conversation when they talked about navigating their single lives. It just didn't come up.
I'm trying to put that comment back up here. PG in the house. PG
Hey,
in the house.
for Sturgis County in the house. Okay. It seems to be an
uh,
issue. Social media seems to shame college educated. Right. Right. Here's what I'm not getting ready to do. I'm not getting ready to shame you. You do what you want to do. I don't care what you want to do. Do you, boo? Here's the most important conversation. How about you stop policing Black women? You tell us how natural our hair should be, how straight our hair should be. You tell us how big our butts should be, how big our butts shouldn't be. You tell us how loud we should be, how loud we shouldn't be. You tell us who we should marry, somebody up, marry down. How about you stop policing Black women and let Black women do what Black women want to do? That's my story, and I'm sticking to that. We are policed in most spaces.
okay, I get that,
Oh,
but
is the expectation for the happily single woman to abstain from sexual intercourse? I mean, if again, listen, I'm not doing the value judgment. I'm just telling you what my respondent said. Do what you want to do. If you want to get yourself you got some friends or benefits or whatever you want to do. It just didn't come up in the conversation that I had with the 62 people that I interviewed. I'm not making any expectations on what you should do. None.
right, I just put that question. That was the same kind of question that we talked about before.
I think that's the one I saw because it was towards the end. I saw sexual, and I
Yeah,
said, "Oh,
that's the yeah. So I just want to put that up there on the screen so anyone else.
yeah."
But I did want to. What were you saying before? Something about shaming Black women or the expectations.
No, I didn't say shaming. I said
I'm using that
policing.
word. Policing. Yes, that's a better word. Yes. Forgive me for that. So are is that the same as having a standard from the male perspective, right? Why is this still on the screen here? If I as a man, um, is it okay? Is it policing to say that a man has to have a certain income, be so tall, to be so whatever? Is that the same? Would you use the same language as far as policing?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I don't think that I would say that that's policing. If we were saying something like, "Oh, Black men have to marry a Black woman and think she got to make sure she got tips behind, she got to have natural hair, she has to have an advanced degree from like a historical Black college and university, and she showed better be all Black, can't be like half Black, half white, or something like that." That's like when we're policing men and telling police men what they can and cannot do. And
Th-
I
that
think it's
that
different.
would be policing, right? If a woman said you got to marry a Black woman, you got to go to HBC, you got to be so tall, make so much money, have a house, a car, call your mama twice a week, would not
No,
not
no,
be the
no, no,
same
no.
thing?
No, no, no. The policing part would be if we said they had to marry somebody who was that tall, had to marry, call their mama twice a week, had the bachelor's degree, da 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 da. The woman they marry would be policing. If we're saying like we just want somebody who's tall, dark, and handsome, that's just a preference structure. But that's not
Okay, so
policing.
I see it as the same thing. If this is
Oh,
if
okay.
I see it as the same thing. If I'm policing you by saying you got to have all these things, and I'm this the only person I'm going to marry, then that's a preference.
No,
I don't
okay.
want to go up in that. Just
Okay.
go ahead. I'll give you the last word
Okay,
about
so what I was
that.
trying to say is like we keep policing Black women. When I say we police Black women, we're saying like Black women have to be open to marrying somebody who makes less money than them, who makes more money than them, who is divorced, who is this, who is that, and we have to tell them what they're supposed to do. That's what I was saying, like policing. So over here, we're telling Black men, you got to marry a woman who has this and this and this and this. We're policing Black women, men, and what they want to do and who they're supposed to marry. But if you just say you want to marry somebody who's tall, dark, and handsome, or marry somebody who's 6'5", that doesn't mean that we're policing you.
Okay. How do you deal with people who refuse to believe that women could ever be happy single?
I don't. I'm like, okay, either you think I'm happy or I'm not, or you think that, there's a really great book by a white scholar, and it's called Single at Heart. Some people were never meant to be like any kind of in romantic relationships. And she had a lot of people that she interviewed and she collected some data and all this kind of stuff. There's some people who like never wanted to be in relationships. And so some people think like, okay, are you really happy? And I'm like, I want to ask married folks, are you really happy? Yeah, I don't engage in that conversation. I'm like, if you don't think I'm happy, that's on you. But I was like, I'm very comfortable and very happy with where I am in life.
Yeah. We're at an hour. So I wanted to. I know you had an hour.
No, we
So
can keep going for a little. We'll go about another 15 minutes, and then that's going to have to be it for me. 'Cause I go to bed early. I go to bed early, but I'm an early riser.
I keep having these ladies on here who go to bed like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. It's crazy.
Listen, but
That's
I
gonna
get, like I
that's
said,
gonna
I
be my
get up
next
at 4.
email. That's gonna be my next email. What time you go to bed? Make sure we can talk.
Right, sure, right. But I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I absolutely do.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us about your day. Do you get up? You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You work out. I mean, what you got?
I do.
Duty?
So I have a boot camp class that so usually when the weather breaks, I have a running group. And it's a whole bunch of Black women, and we try to run from like 4:30 to about 5:45. And then I have a boot camp class that I go to. It used to be in person, but now it's on Zoom. It's on Zoom now. And after I finish with my boot camp, then I go and I swim. I love to swim. And after I swim, I then get dressed. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I teach my classes and I have to be in class by 8 o'clock. So I get a whole bunch of stuff done before I get to class at 8 o'clock. On Mondays are my mental health day. And I stand by my mental health day. I think it's really important that we talk more about mental health in Black America, especially the current climate that we're in America. We have to make sure that we're talking about our mental health and well-being. So for me, I have mental health Mondays where I do all of the stuff that I want to do and none of the stuff that I have to do. I also see my therapist on Monday. I think it's really important. Anybody that's Black in America should be seeing a therapist. And so every Monday, well, not every Monday, but most Mondays, I also try to go to the golf course. I'm going tomorrow because the weather's going to be about 59 degrees, I think. And so Mondays are the stuff I do all the stuff that I want to do and none of the stuff that I have to do. And that's really important to me, that I draw those boundaries and I let people know. And I try to mimic to my students what I want them to do. We need to hold space for ourselves. And I feel like in some ways I tithe to myself the first day of the week, and I'll give to my students every other day. But for me, my mental health Monday is really, really, really important to me. And golfing is a big part of my mental health Monday.
What do you do about people? Okay, very good. I want to acknowledge what you said there. I think that's important for the mental health, for the exercise routines. I definitely think that's very important. What do you do for people who want to be married? But you're not a dating coach. You just do the numbers, right? So you don't have any type of words. Do your circle of girlfriends, are they all kind of suffering or dealing with the same thing? Do they want to be married? They happy being single? What are they trying to do?
There's some that want to be in relationships. There's some that are very happy with their singleness. There's some that are married and miserable. There's some that are married and living in bliss. So it just runs the gamut of things. Again, like I said, I don't give advice, but I'm like, go to the airport. I would say this: go to the airport, get dressed up, go to the airport. You ain't got to be going nowhere. Just go to the airport, sit in the airport for a little while. People always going somewhere, and you know a lot of people in the airport. But I just don't give advice. That's not what this is. It really is about just understanding what singles are doing.
And what do you have coming up I mean, you have any other books coming up, any talks anymore? What else you have coming up?
Um, So I actually am going to the UK. I'm going to California on Thursday for a book talk on Friday. I'm not sure. I was going to say I'm not sure this is going to air, but this is live. And then next week I'll be in the UK. My book was published by Cambridge University Press, and so I'm going to give a book talk there. And then I found a Black women's group in London, and I'm going to meet up with them because we want to have it's all single women, I believe, and we want to have a conversation on how you make friends later in life. We spend a lot of times, and this kind of gets something I talk about in the book. We spend a lot of time talking about like marriage and romantic relationships. And we have to understand that there's also other kind of relationships, these non-romantic nurturing relationships like friendships. And how do we as older adults actually make friends later in life? We've got all these dating websites and stuff like that, but we just don't have these sites where you can like make a friend, just a legit just friend you can travel with, go play golf with, go to church with. And so we're having a conversation like how you make friends later in life. So that's some of the things that are coming up. But then also I am planning to write another book, not about singles. I'm actually kind of done with the singlehood argument. I've opened up a whole bunch of conversation. I hope other scholars come behind me, pick up the conversation and carry the conversation forward. I actually want to write two books. One is about the Black middle class in South Africa. Because when we think about South Africa, people often think of HIV, famine, and AIDS and apartheid. But there is a thriving Black middle class in spite of all of that. And so I really want to have a conversation, write a book about the Black middle class in South Africa and juxtapose or compare that with the Black middle class in America. So I collected data when I spent a year in South Africa, 2017. So at some point, I'm going to write that book. But I also really want to write a book about golf because I think that golf is a really interesting sport. It's actually a book about sociology, but I'm using golf as the vehicle to have that conversation, have a sociological conversation. And so I'm really excited to write a book about golf because that means I have to be on the golf course collecting data. So when my colleagues are looking for me, I'm like, oh, I'm on the golf course collecting data. So look out for a book about Black golfers coming out sometime in the very near future.
We talked about that 1 out of 3. We talked about that at the beginning of the show here, and I think that's really important because I was watching a show on Netflix. I'm talking about the presentation of how we view ourselves and how the world views us as Black folks, and as we view ourselves. You talk about South Africa. There was a show I was watching on Netflix, and it showed this middle class Black family in South Africa, and I was like, wow, and I had never thought about it. It was really good, well produced, and all this kind of stuff. It was a show about the woman who wasn't happy and cheating on her husband, but but at least they were in the middle class doing that, and it was on
Right.
Netflix. Right? So I was actually impressed, like, oh, this is good, to see this kind of phenomenon going on. So that's great. What classes do you teach? Do you teach all sociology classes? What classes do you teach?
I do typically teach sociology classes, but for the last, I think, 5 semesters, I've been teaching a sociology class, and I center the course around the animated show, The Boondocks. And it has been my most favorite class that I'm able to teach. Here's what I know, and this is how Kris Marsh, look, thank you, Nicole. This is what I know. The way I taught in '08 cannot and should not be the same way I am teaching my students in 2024. They are tethered to social media. They have lived through a pandemic. Trying to PowerPoint them to death for an hour and 15 minutes is going to be boring for everybody. And I swear to you, some of my colleagues still have, what are those things called? Oh, what are they called? Oh, wait, when you put it on, oh gosh, what is it called? I can't think of the name now. When you put it under the little light and you have the little things, the little
No, they
pieces of paper.
don't. No, they don't. No, they don't.
I swear, what am I called? What are those called? Oh my gosh, I can't think. But you know what I'm talking about? Transparencies. Transparencies. One of my colleagues had transparencies. He has since passed away. He does not have them anymore. So here's the deal. The reason why I use the Boondocks is because I'm trying to teach my students how to be critical consumers of what they see on the big screen, the little screen, and on social media. The two best compliments I've ever gotten out of the class is that it's an 8 a.m. class. It's Tuesday morning and Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Last semester, I had 30 students on a wait list for an 8 a.m. class. I over enrolled the class to 190 students, and I still have a dozen students on the wait list for an 8 a.m. class. That's one compliment. The other compliment that students give me out of this class is why I get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to teach it, is they say, I'm looking at the Boondocks so differently now. My work here is done. I've taught you how to be critical consumers. Take that, carry it forward in your daily lives. And it's going to make, especially in this space that we're in now with so much disinformation and so much just interesting information that's out there on the big screen, little screen, and on social media. So that's why I use the Boondocks as a way to kind of really reach my students.
Very good. Very good. I might have to sign up for that class. And I wanted to say that I do appreciate, and I do think that men. I want to say this before I forget. I do think that men need to work on their skills, and we talked about this before we jumped on. That yeah, men have this thing about not wanting to seem the GAY word. They don't want to.
Right.
If we have a cohort of friends and all that, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with being open and having a good group of golfing buddies or whatever. A good friend of mine was sick the other day, and I just happened to call him for some business stuff because he was in a line of work that I wanted to ask him a question about. And I called him up, and he happened to be sick. So I'm like, oh man, all right, well, you need anything? He's like, yeah, if you could bring me some Theraflu. So I'm like, hey, brother, you don't have nobody bringing us some Theraflu. So I brought him some Theraflu and some chicken soup and stuff. So I think that we do need that, and I think a lot of times, we're just sitting at home and suffer in silence rather than having a family member or a friend that would just call us. We could just call because we don't want to seem weak. That I do think that we need to work on our masculinity about. Is there's nothing wrong in saying, listen, brother, I'm not feeling too well. Can you go get me some chicken soup, or can you bring me something,
Yeah.
or whatever? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It doesn't challenge our masculinity. High Vibe says, don't forget to hit the like button. I don't know where we're at with the thumbs up and all that. But she also asked a very good question. She says, I visited South Africa in 2005, stayed in Soweto. Some women turn their homes into bed and breakfast. You can see a growing middle class. Do you see the same issue of women outperforming men in South Africa?
That's a really great question. I spent some time in Soweto. I'm a huge fan. I spent most of my time in Johannesburg. I love South Africa. I highly recommend that everybody goes because I think people have a certain assumption of what South Africa is, and it's nothing like what people are going to assume that it is. But yes, there is a growing Black middle class. There's been a stable Black middle class. And I did interview, I think, 92 people in South Africa. And I was just going to talk about like South, Black middle class and what Black middle class means in the South African context. And I started to hear the rumblings of the singlehood movement coming up in the interviews. It was not my focus, and it was like rumblings. It wasn't a central part of the interviews, but yes, I would argue that there are some professional Black women that are concerned about being partnered and being married, and if there are available Black men that they could actually marry. So this idea of like outperformance, we might start to pick up in South Africa as well.
So this is a thing that the Black manosphere or the manosphere, well, let's just stick with the Black manosphere in particular, is saying, and I think that this is not just it's not just the Black manosphere, but I think that it's something that we're seeing within that governments are starting to respond to, is that the better the women are doing, that they're not partnering up, right? This is why we have the migrant crisis in the United States. Chinese men are now saying they don't want to deal with Chinese women because their standards are ridiculous. So the Chinese men are flying out the country to Russia, getting Ukrainian women, marrying African women, and bringing back to China. And now there's a word for it. I don't know what it is, but it's a word in Chinese which means leftover women. So
Right.
is it possible that this is just a growing phenomenon? The better the women do, that the men are just not interested in those types of women.
So if we think about it, it's called economic independence. So the more economic independent women are, the question becomes, again, I'm not making this a value judgment, but I just want us to think about what's the utility of marriage. If women are becoming economically independent and they're doing well by themselves, what is the utility of marriage? That's a question we have to ask first. And then you now have a lot of women that because of the economic independence are doing well. Where does marriage fit into that conversation? Now, I am not suggesting that marriage is only an economic conversation, but I can't answer that right now. I am not suggesting that marriage is only an economic conversation, but I do think that's part of the conversation that people are having when they talk about women outperforming men and men going to other places. Because is it all about economics, or is there something else you're getting married for? Because if you're only getting married for economics, yeah, we're going to see the marriage rates the same. So is that what marriage is?
Well, I think it means different things to different people. And if we're talking about, there was a comment that I don't know if I posted it on here. It talked about what men and women essentially want different things. So Jayla is saying it's about companionship. Well, if it's about companionship, I don't think that this would be an issue. Now my mouse is acting stupid here. If it's about companionship, then I don't think that we would be having this conversation. But there's certainly something going on with that dynamic, that the better that women do, the less they tend to be married, or their
Right.
marriages don't last as long, right? And
Mhm.
I think once the woman starts, I don't know if you've ever read this statistic, but once a woman starts out earning the men, then the marriage rates, it's like a 90% divorce rate or something like that once she starts
Right.
out earning the man. So that might be something as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So this is got to be something to be explored. So we're at an hour and 15. I don't want to hold you. So you got that
Okay.
coming up. I definitely want to have you back on to talk about the college education component,
Oh,
to talk
absolutely.
about, yeah, to talk about that kind of thing. So, and I can
Yeah.
see you starting to yawn and starting to fade here. So, all
Like
right.
I'm fading quickly. Like I'm trying to hold on.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I'm going to let you go. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes to talk to these guys if they want to ask a question or anything like that. But I certainly appreciate you coming on. Good luck in your talk in the UK and all that kind of stuff. So I
Okay.
definitely appreciate it. Is there any final words you want to have to say?
No, but I was gonna say if there's any like pressing question that I didn't get a chance to ask of your audience, if you can just text me, I can text you back.
No, these are just comments. These are comments. I'm sorry.
Okay. If there's anything that someone was really pressing and I didn't get a chance to ask, I didn't get a chance to answer, you can just send me a quick text and I'll give you my reply.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. So I will see you again soon, hopefully on the show again soon. Thank you for having me. It has been such a pleasure and a joy always to chat with you.
Always. Thank you so much. Do well in the golf course. I appreciate what
Yes.
you're doing. So thank you so
Thank you.
much. I really, really appreciate it. I'm glad you came on the show. So
Thank you. It's a
go get.
pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I have no idea how to log off now.
You could just hit the X at the top there. You don't have to. Nothing fancy, I don't think. So.
I had to had to put my glasses on. X at the top. Leave
All right, y'all. That was Dr. Marsh. I really appreciate her coming on. I'll give you guys like 15 minutes. You guys have any other questions you wanted me to ask or anything like that? But I do appreciate her coming on. If you have not gotten her book, it is the first 2 chapters, which she said are very, very dense, walking through a lot of numbers if you haven't read it. But once you get to like chapter 3, it's actually a much, I don't want to say it's a different read. So and all that. And I also talked to Diane Stewart's assistant. She will be coming back on. We're going to do March 2nd, Diane Stewart. And I think that Auntie Anita, if she's still my friend, wanted to come on with her. So I'm going to try to have those 2 on as well. So yeah. So if anybody else has any questions or any topics or anything like that, we can certainly go through it. I do appreciate all you all who have been rocking with us thus far tonight. So make sure you hit the like button. We were at 35 before, so make sure you hit the like button. I do plan on doing a show on Wednesday, and it's going to be like a brainstorming session. We talked about that, but there's another brainstorming session I wanted to have first, and it's about why women, essentially like the last question we asked is why women don't want to get married, in particular Black women after the 1960s. And I'd like to get your opinion about that, so you guys can start thinking about that. So that'll be on Wednesday. Not sure if I want to do it in the afternoon or what. A question that was asked of me is to have you all kind of chime in where you're listening from. I know some people from Philly, some people from Prince George's County. Is anyone else where y'all from? So I can get a 40 thumbs up. Thank you so much, Rhonda. Where y'all from? Tell me where you're from. You can say Midwest, or if you don't want to give your. I appreciate that. Ripple and waves. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Please make sure you hit the like button when you listen. I'm always taking suggestions for show ideas and all that kind of stuff. Dallas, Midwest, Charlotte. I think I said this before. My best friend is in the Charlotte Mecklenburg County. Cincinnati, the ATL, New York State. I'm assuming that's New York State. I just had to drive to JFK to go pick up my daughter the other day. Kansas City, Missouri or Kansas? Missouri. I saw a funny video today. It was a funny video. This lady was sounding so confident when maybe it was satire, but she was sounding so confident. She kept saying that Washington Commanders were from the Washington State, and she's like, that makes it sound like you don't realize that the Kansas City Chiefs are from Missouri. What? Houston, Sacramento, Cleveland. Yeah. All right. So I'm very sensitive to the West Coast people there. I want to make sure y'all can tune into the shows. Missouri Chiefs Kingdom, dog. Okay. Okay, Chiefs Kingdom. I am unapologetically saying that I want them to lose the Super Bowl. They're probably going to win, but I would not be rooting for the Chiefs. I would not be rooting for the Chiefs. For the record, we are not asking men to cry. We want men to be able to share, discuss, and empathize with that person who directly affects the daily matters of our home, money, and relationship. I can get that. I mean, yeah, I can get that. Yeah, I think they should be able to do. I can't disagree with that, tree hugger. I can't disagree that you want men to be able to have a conversation about what's going on with the finances and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. Yeah. Yes, the Eagles are still in it. I'll never forget the Chiefs for beating my 49ers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Taylor paid off the refs. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so going back to this comment here, yeah, I definitely think that men got to do a better job with that, man. I watched I watched something else talking about the number one killer of women. I think it's the number one killer of men too, but which is heart disease. And one of the ways to combat heart disease is to have a good circle of friendships in addition to changing your diet and exercise and all that. If you have a good friend group, in particular for women, this was the study that was released, and I read the study. It didn't mention men, but if you're dealing with that, a good friend group can go a long way. You can get things off your chest, you can have a conversation. So we definitely got to work with men with creating that type of group and not being seen as feminine. And and I think that they probably do have that, right? I talked about the hunting groups, fishing groups, sitting around, um working on cars, whatever hobbies they have. So I think that all that is important. I think all that is important. People want men to open up, but that's not going to happen. People use words against them too often. Yeah, well, I've talked about that as well. You got to be able to hold those type of things on the inside, or never ever bring it up again. That is one of the number one problems that men have about opening up, is they don't ever want to hear it again. You know. Yeah, you got to be a good sister too, right? Emotional intelligence is one tool used to gauge if men are sincere and trustworthy. Yeah, that term's being thrown around a lot these days, emotional intelligence. Self care includes the heart, find love in other forms besides romance. That's definitely important, DC. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all coming up here and vibing for this hour and 20 minutes. I really, really appreciate it. I think I'm going to call it for the night. I have not played any video games all week. I'm going to play some video games. Are there also there isn't a stigma about being unmarried that there used to be? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I think because of the financial aspect. If you have the finances, if you're an unmarried woman, back in the 50s or so, that would probably seen as a method of being poor, but as women have done better, they're like, yeah, and especially too if the conversation is about, I don't got to deal with some unemotionally intelligent man who's, some brute who's physically, verbally, or financially abusive. You don't got to deal with that. You ain't gonna deal with it. I can't say you're wrong for that. I can't say that any woman is wrong for not wanting to deal with that kind of stuff. Thank you, High Vibe. Thank you. I think you're right. If you truly love your other half, you can create an understanding. I think if you really love her, you won't be treating her or mistreating her, right? So y'all make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed. I really appreciate y'all checking this out. I am going to call it for tonight. I really appreciate Dr. Marsh for coming on the show. She was really, really great, um, and all that. So I definitely look forward to having her back on. So we're going to call it for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. If you have any show topics or ideas or questions, I finally got around to answering somebody else's question the other day. So you can always send me an email. Some people have sent me some stuff, some good stuff in the last 2 days. So I'll hopefully get to that sometime this week. Um, and hit the like button. I can also buy me some lunch too. So, you too, Rhonda. You have a great week. What does the term financial abuse mean? It means that if you are the breadwinner of the family and she needs to get her nails done, or not nails, I would say something that she really needs, feminine hygiene products, that you are denying her that, or her favorite food is this, and you tell her we don't have the money to buy your favorite food. Or she can't get her hair done, which is probably necessary for work, or she needs, she wants to start a new job and she needs a new outfit for her job, and you're refusing to do that. That is financial abuse, and it's highly linked to physical abuse, right? If you start doing that stuff, then you know, want your woman to become independent. So that's what financial abuse would mean. The Midwest is a desert. Okay, okay, all right. Good night, everyone. Would Dr. Marsh be available for the panel with Dr. Diane? I'll ask. I'll ask. It would be great. It would be great. Yes, please hit up Dr. L's Cash App. Good night, y'all. Good night. Good night. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys. Take care. Much love and peace. Thank you to the moderators. Thank you to all of you. Have a good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves. And women no longer going to be financially dependent upon their husband. This is disempowering. Yeah. So, well, by disempowering to the men, I assume that's what you mean. But they are definitely empowering themselves. So, and they don't want to. I don't blame a woman who doesn't want to be financially disempowered, financially abused. I don't blame any woman for that, right? You know, it's one thing to put yourself in a man to be a stay-at-home mom or wife, and you know, and now this guy's going to be a jerk. Nah, nobody's going to want to deal with that. You know, yeah, yeah. So nobody's going to want to deal with that. So, all right, y'all, take care of yourselves. Much love and peace.